What differentiated the new G4 from just any good YouTube channel? And what's great about YouTube is, here's the thing, and Rob, you've said it, so I'm going to quote Robert Meyer Burnett with him on the show.
We do often.
He says that Rob has mentioned, and you've mentioned this several times, that the new currency is authenticity. The old G4 had authenticity, even though there were produced segments, comedy bits, and whatnot. Like, God, there was an episode where Kevin and Olivia played the Wonder Twins. I mean, they would just ridiculous comedic segments, but authenticity. That is why YouTube is so popular. Because it's unproduced.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest faux pas that Frost did was she admitted that they don't play the games, they don't even write the reviews, they just sit there and read what other people have scripted for them, and instantly every credibility of the on-screen talent was gone.
And you might as well said Chat GPT's written everything. It was crazy that she said that, because I honestly believe that in our AI, soon to be AI drenched culture, I really do think that individuals, the great currency that we're all going to have moving forward in the 21st century, is authenticity, because it's going to get to the point where you're probably going to be able to CGI your own avatar, put it on your own YouTube channel, have Chat GPT write a script for you, and people think they're watching you live. I mean, we're going to get there, so they'll be able to tell. I mean, you can't fake the twinkle in a person's eye when they say something.
Yep.
And I think that one of the great things, Chris, the thing about Attack of the Show, I was actually on it once. You got me on it to produce or to promote the comic book I self-published, which was actually very, very cool. And I didn't write or draw it; I just published it. But it that show was fun, and it reflected the audience. And what's really interesting now is that we live in this weird performative activist culture that has sort of been imposed on us. It's almost, in a way, it's almost like there's this fascist government that doesn't really exist, but it'll come after you anyway if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And people are going to get tired of it. And I'd give it maybe another year or two, and it's going to snap back hard. And the people that are willing to embrace who they are, or the people that have always been, like Gary Beekler at Nerdrotic, somebody said to me, what he's doing now is protest. I've always said I like Gary because he's a San Francisco punk rocker. He's the counterculture that they had in the 60s brought into the 2020s. And that's what he's doing on YouTube. He's protest programming, and he's demanding authenticity. And I'm like, I like that, because everyone is dancing around eggshells these days and not being their true selves.
Man, I'd settle for just basic creative competency at this point.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, all the stuff coming out of Star Wars Celebration. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch it. It was cringeworthy stuff coming out of there. And I'm like, why is it so hard for Hollywood to just understand basic storytelling? Like we're not asking for like a full hero's journey or anything like that. We just want something that's basically entertaining. And they can't even give that to us.
Yeah, the reason why is because you can't, when you make a copy of a VHS tape, what happens? You get a worse copy of the original. And all of the people who are writing stories now are basically, making copies of good stuff that came from before. They don't
like that movie Multiplicity. We're at the 5th clone right now.
Or that movie, The Force Awakens, which was basically just like a rehash of Episode 4.
It's a copy of a copy of a copy, and
a bad copy of Episode 4. But it's interesting. There's still lots of good stuff. Like last night's episode of Succession was a banger, and the acting was terrific. Interesting story, and the fact that the creators said, no, we're ending it. Season 4, they're like, we're going to go out the way we want to go out. When we made the show the way we want to make the show. And there's still a lot of people, when a Craig Mazin, I think, gets something like The Last of Us and works with Neil Druckmann, they create something that's worthy of watching. There are creators that are making great things.
Well, HBO seems to have their thumb on the pulse,
they always have.
Is good. Yeah.
The people, and what are they trying to do? Dismantle it, take away the HBO moniker and make it just Max.
Right.
Not understanding what they've got there. That's
so weird. Why would you do that? HBO is synonymous with entertainment.
I think what's really interesting is that and Star Trek is like this too. You know, Terry Matalas was somebody who came in and loved Star Trek. He worked in post-production on Deep Space Nine. He worked with Brandon Braga on Voyager. He worked on Enterprise. Then he cut his teeth writing shows like Nikita. And then he was a showrunner on 12 Monkeys, which, I mean, if you look at the scripting, the writing on 12 Monkeys, it's tight as a drum. I mean, that's a beautifully, like Succession, a 4-season series. And the problem is the people in charge that are making these decisions, they don't know what's good or bad. So all they can do is hire people that have a track record of some kind. They don't necessarily know if those are the right people for the right job, but they'll hire them. They'll be like, well, this person's done 6 things. Let's give them this. And it becomes as if it's generic, and that's how corporations choose to. I understand a corporation's like, okay, this person has an Ivy League master's degree in business, so he goes to the front, or she goes to the front, or they go to the front of the line, and then it's not necessarily, well, do you love our IP? Well, I'll find out. I'll find out about your IP. Okay, well, you've got a business degree. We'll hire you. Right. And like, how did Gary Beekler's been doing some great lately? He has an editor. He's working with Perry Chan. They've been doing some really cool standalone analysis videos that are hilarious, scathing, but also quite insightful. And people get mad when I promote Gary, but look, good work is good work.
Right.
And what's really interesting is like his stuff, that his coverage on Rings of Power. This article that came out that I covered on my show as well, about Jennifer Salke talking about Rings of Power and how it had only a 37% completion ratio. That means people that started watching the show, only 37% finished all 8 episodes. Netflix's policy is if a show doesn't have a 50% completion ratio for whatever reason, it's canceled.
You know what's interesting about what you just said, Rob, when it comes to Gary, when it comes to the Popcast guys, when it comes to you, when it comes to Geeks and Gamers, you know, name whoever you want. When you're a channel that levies criticism at entertainment properties, it's more than just like, oh, I didn't like this. This is stupid. This sucks. You guys point out exactly what's wrong with it, why it's wrong, and how it could be fixed. Right. And when you're that kind of like salient with your criticisms, like Gary is excellent at this. Like he just zeroes in on all the problems and why it's a problem. Like, it becomes hard to ignore, and people flock to that more so than when people just like, I didn't like it because it's racist or like whatever. You know, like, it's like when you're criticizing something, you have to be mindful of like how you're criticizing it and be thoughtful about it if you want people to take you seriously. Thing I love about Shane and Brian here is that when there was good Star Trek, they acknowledged, hey, this is good Star Trek.
Yeah.
When it was bad Star Trek, they weren't afraid to call out, hey, this is bad Star Trek, and here's why it's bad.
Well, I think something happened in the last week that's incredibly significant to all YouTubers that are covering media. Russell Crowe did an interview with Critical Drinker.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And the studio, a guy named Jeff Katz was one of the people responsible for the movie. They got, I mean, Critical Drinker has over 1 million subscribers. I think his story analysis is very on point.
Oh, yeah.
In the real world, he's a novelist himself. And the fact that the studio sought him out and got him a great interview. Now, it's not because Critical Drinker's a shill. They went to him, and they went after his audience because his audience are the people that they want.
Can I offer a quick thing? I'm the one that connected Jeff Katz to Critical Drinker.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go.
So Jeff Katz, who I've
awesome.
known for years, you probably met him at San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah, and he was at Fox for a long time.
Yeah, so he's been around. He is responsible for Snakes on a Plane. This is and by the way, we had a whole email exchange. He DM'd me on Twitter. We were talking. He was going to try to get Russell Crowe on the Film Threat livecast, but they ultimately went with Drinker, which I have no problem with. Drinker's got a bigger audience than me. Yeah. Makes sense. And then I reached out to Drinker because I've been on a show a bunch of times and just connected Jeff with Drinker. But Jeff was, all I can say is this: there are a lot of people in Hollywood that are aware of what the problem is. There are a lot, and they don't like what's happening, and they pay attention to people who are speaking out about it. The problem is there aren't enough people who work in the industry who are saying, hey, maybe this pathway we're going down isn't working. Because I was at Midnight's Edge in the morning this morning, and I said, can anyone cite an example of an overly woke movie that was a huge financial success and a broad mainstream success? And there isn't one.
No.
Not one example. Not a TV show, not a, if the metrics are out there, that's what I love about box office. You can't fudge the numbers that much. It's right out there in the open. What movies succeeded? Mario. What movies failed? Strange New World. And that movie failed colossally. By the way, I saw that movie in a theater. How god awful. But anyways,
well,
so yeah, I just want to say, like, that's a significant thing. And Jeff was saying, like, he had to convince the studio, which was Sony, to, like, this is a good idea. We should have Russell do this. And Russell just didn't do like a 4 or 5 minute junket interview.
No,
he was on for 30 minutes. I watched the interview. It was very good. No surprise.
Well, Drinker is a very smart guy.
Yeah.
And so is Gary Beekler. And, when he does Friday Night Tights or something, I understand a lot of people, the free form conversation might turn people off. I get accused when I promote his videos, and I'm like, look, despite what you think of Gary, watch this video, because the script he writes for these things and the editing that Perry Chan is doing, he's making some really great content that is worth watching.
Right.
And I think that in a way, all of us are kind of at the vanguard of, while everyone else, while our younger audiences are going a little nutty, we're the people that are saying, look, here, let's bring you down to the real world. Let's stop the performance activism and let's have a real conversation. And I always say to people that come after me, I'm like, look, you have a problem with me. You have an open invitation. Come on my show, come on live, and let's talk about it. If you hate my guts, or you think I'm wrong, or I leave that as an open invitation to anybody. And if you want to, and no one's taking me up on it. Not one person.
It's funny, when James Mangold came after me and the Salty Nerd podcast, we had a lot of YouTubers who basically sided with Mangold just because he was James Mangold. And I reached out to all of them. I was like, hey, have me on your show. Let's talk about it. And when I actually showed up and showed that, like, we weren't like, basement dwelling neckbeards like Mangold accused us of being, and we could actually have like an intelligent conversation about like what it was I actually said that got James Mangold so upset. A lot of these YouTubers actually became really good friends of ours.
Right. Well, you don't get 1.5 million subscribers for The Drinker. You don't get 800,000 subscribers for Nerdrotic if you don't know what you're talking about and you're not like striking a chord in a lot of people. And hopefully the studios start to realize, and stop focusing on, Friday Night Tights as entertainment. If you, like what Rob said, if you really focus on the content specifically that like Gary's putting out, like Drinker's putting out, it's critical thought processes through all of these types of things that are happening, and it makes sense. And anybody who believes in common sense, just watch a little bit of it, and you're immediately going to go.
There aren't a lot of people who believe in common sense anymore, though, Shane.
No, that's not true. There's a lot of people do. They're just not very loud, and that's a part of our problem, I think.
Well, it's interesting. I came across you guys, the Popcast channel, because I loved your produced content. I started watching your stuff, and I'm like, these guys are really, well, the dulcet tones of your voice, Shane. But also I really, and the same was true. The same was true of Midnight's Edge. I didn't know those guys. And when I jumped into the space, especially during COVID, we all started meeting one another and streaming. And I think it's been great. And seeing different points of view and people coming together, like, look, we all have slightly different points of view, all of us that are here on this panel now, but we can have great discussions and respect one another and talk to one another. And I think that the mainstream media is not doing it. Joe Rogan goes on and has a 3-hour conversation with somebody. No one can sit there. People keep trying to take him down, but it's like, look, he just asks questions to people.
Right.
And you get to actually, the mainstream media is dead. I mean, they don't know it yet, but they're dead because they can't do what we do. They can't put on any guests they have, or they talk for 3 or 4 minutes. How do you have any substantive conversation if that's going on? And it's all happening on YouTube, and Hollywood completely they lost the YouTube audience at their peril. They didn't pay attention. People laughed at me for going on to YouTube.
Right.
And it's a whole different world. And everyone, look at the streaming services. They're scrambling. They don't understand why they're not making money hand over fist. They don't know. They don't get it.